Foreign Secretary, Britain pioneered putting sanctions on Iran's central bank. Are you now the one engineering the oil embargo?
Well, we're part of the strong pressure from the European Union. We're working together with all of our colleagues on this, particularly in France and Germany. So yes, Britain has very strong views about this. We would like to see the European Union this month adopt stronger sanctions on Iran, including on the oil sector, including on the financial sector. But I think it's very important for people in Iran to understand that this is not just Britain doing this. This pressure is coming from all around the European Union. There is general agreement in the European Union that we will have to impose a stronger set of sanctions because we continue to have the major problem over Iran's nuclear program, not a quarrel with the Iranian people, but of course a major disagreement with the government of Iran.
Well, we'll get back to the people of Iran, but before that, I'm curious to know if there is any major objections coming out of EU for the oil embargo and who from?
Well, of course, there will be a discussion. There's a discussion going on, and there'll be a further discussion when foreign ministers meet on the 23rd of January. There are countries that have existing contracts or obligations with Iran, which of course complicates this. But we will find our way through that. We will end up with a package of measures which does put greater pressure on Iran in a peaceful and legitimate way. We don't like doing this, but this is a way in which we can show our disapproval and put more pressure on the government of Iran without doing anything that is violent or illegal or escalates a situation that, of course, we want to see resolved.
UN has, in the past 5 years, has put 4 sanction resolutions. EU and US have expanded their designation lists 2 to 3 folds. Why do you think this time will be different? Because if the objective of sanctions is changing the behavior of Iranian regime, it hasn't yet so far. It hasn't done so far.
Yes, of course it is true that this has not yet changed the behavior of the regime. But first of all, of course, as we step up these measures, they do have more of an impact, particularly in the financial and energy sector. There's no doubt that the financial measures taken by the United States and also by the United Kingdom do have an impact on the ability to finance the nuclear program, but a broader impact as well. It's important too, the second point is that other countries are joining in this pressure. For instance, Japan has just said that it will reduce or in some ways restrict its own oil imports from Iran. Japan is a major market for the oil production of Iran. So this is not just the European Union and the United States. And thirdly, we adopt these measures because we're trying to avoid worse things happening. We don't want to see military conflict, nor do we want to see nuclear proliferation in the Middle East, which is what we fear. We fear Iran having a nuclear weapon because we think that would then cause other countries in the region to develop their own nuclear weapons, which would place the people of Iran and the people of the whole region in greater danger. And it's because all of these alternatives are worse that we want to see negotiations succeed, and the pressure to be more flexible in negotiations is sanctions.
Well, let's go to Iran and let's see it from the viewpoint of Iranian leaders. You have the scenario of Libya, a country which abandons its nuclear program, cozies up to the West, and soon is bombed out of power, the Libyan leaders. On the other hand, you have North Korea. Because they have their button on the bomb, everybody stays away from them. If you were an Iranian leader, which one would you choose?
Well, first of all these situations are different. And I don't think whichever country I was in the world that I would be following the example of North Korea, a society that faces immense difficulties and whose behavior on the nuclear program is, of course, increasing their isolation from the rest of the world. But, of course, in the case of Iran, there is a greater danger even than we have seen in North Korea because of the effect on other countries. Because it risks other countries in the same region as Iran also developing nuclear weapons and causing a nuclear arms race in the region that is not taking place in the Middle East now. So this is why it is a direct danger to the peace of the region and to the future and the security of the people of Iran. And I think that is more dramatically the case than in any of the other instances that you have mentioned, and that's why this is different.
Well, a lot of observers say we've seen this before. A country is accused of developing weapons and there's not enough evidence for it. If it were, it should have been pursued in IAEA Governing Council and then further in UN Security Council rather than unilateral sanctions. Then it is weakened by unilateral sanctions and then you go to war with them. You just suggested you don't want anything worse happening. Are you suggesting that the next step is actually a military confrontation with Iran?
No, we're not calling for military action. We've not ruled out any options or supporting any options. But I think this is a specific case. First of all, these are particular problems. It should not be compared to any other case that we've been dealing with. It is a different problem in a different region from Libya or some of the other cases that we've just been discussing. And so no, what we want to see is negotiations. We want to see this resolved through negotiations. The framework for negotiations is there, what we call the E3+3, negotiating with Iran. The offer of negotiations is there, and it remains there. And we encourage Iran to respond positively to the efforts of Baroness Ashton to bring about negotiations, Baroness Ashton on behalf of the European Union, but also on behalf of the other members of the UN Security Council. This is the way to go. Instead, Iran is expanding its enrichment to 20%, moving enrichment to the COM facility. These are provocative acts. They cannot be explained in the context of a peaceful nuclear program. And so Iran is losing ground in the world, as the world looks at these issues, losing friends and losing influence in the world because of this program. And that's why I underline that it is not in the interests of Iran to pursue a nuclear weapons program. It puts their own people in greater danger, and it means that more and more countries are turning against them.
Are you absolutely sure that Iran is developing a nuclear bomb?
Yes, absolutely sure. Developing a nuclear weapons capability, which can then, at some future date, either be turned into an actual bomb or not. Iran is working on that. The latest report of the IAEA that was issued in November pointed clearly to the military dimensions of the nuclear program and the concerns about that. So there is no doubt in my mind from all the information that I have seen about that. Equally, there is no doubt that Iran has tried to conceal parts of its nuclear program, that the existence of the enrichment facility at COM was revealed by other countries, as you remember. 3 years ago, Iran hadn't previously revealed that to the world. So this has been a partly secret program. It is engaged in activity that cannot be explained for peaceful purposes, and this is why we are so concerned about it in the rest of the world.
Have you shared this information with your Russian and Chinese counterparts, and why don't you pursue this in UN Security Council, another resolution there?
Well, of course, there have been, as you said earlier, there have been many resolutions of the United Nations Security Council. And Russia and China have also expressed their strong concerns about Iran's nuclear program. It is true that there are sometimes differences between Russia and China on the one hand and the other countries on such as Britain, France and the United States about how to pursue the matter. Nevertheless, we continue to work together on it. We impose more sanctions than Russia and China. But all of these countries are deeply concerned about the program, very much opposed to nuclear proliferation, and all have supported the previous resolutions of the UN Security Council.
Well, you know what Iran has said, if you put an oil embargo, that they will close down the Strait of Hormuz. And your your defense secretary delivered quite serious words that Britain will react to that. And if, as of the day after the oil embargo, Iran does actually close the Strait of Hormuz, what will be your immediate reaction to that?
There are a whole range of things that could happen over the coming months and years, and we will react to them if they happen. As the Defense Secretary explained, such an action would be illegal. It would be unsuccessful as well. It would also, of course, be devastating to Iran itself.
Are you prepared to go to war?
We are not talking the language of war, but I will only react to situations when they arise. I'm not going to. There are so many hypothetical situations, but on that specific threat that was made to close the Straits of Hormuz, it would be unsuccessful, and it would be deeply counterproductive from Iran's point of view, since economically, of course, it would be disastrous for Iran to do that.
Since you have put a sanction on Iran's central bank, the currency an average Iranian family holds in that country has dropped 1/3. It's like average Iranian family is paying 30% more for medicines which are imported to the country, the basic foodstuff which are imported to the country. Don't you think you're creating enemy out of Iranian people? Don't you think your sanctions, despite what you say about trying to change the behavior of the regime, it is actually affecting the people of Iran?
I think that the currency will be losing its value in Iran for many reasons. Yes, we have announced the cutting of financial ties between our financial institutions and those of Iran, although those ties were not very extensive before we announced that. But I think this is happening for wider reasons, of a loss of confidence, international confidence in the Iranian economy. The more there is an atmosphere of crisis, then of course the more that will affect, because of attitudes all over the world, the Iranian currency and therefore the people of Iran. So I don't think that is just brought about by sanctions. Also, of course, we have seen very poor economic management in Iran, and that has an effect as well. So the solution to this lies within Iran, of a different approach to the world, of a more constructive approach. And we have no quarrel with the Iranian people, and we do not want to see the Iranian people suffer. But our argument is that sanctions are better than a military conflict or the proliferation of nuclear weapons, which are a bigger threat to the Iranian people than anything that is happening now.
Well, if you're in Tehran, you're an average Iranian family, you see a regime, a government which is not even elected by that particular family, for example, and the West engage in this conflict. What do you expect that family to do? Are you trying to encourage a revolt from within the country by your sanctions?
No, we are not getting involved in the internal politics of Iran. But of course, we would say everyone has to question why their country is set on that direction. But this is up to the people of Iran, to the government of Iran. We are not going to intervene in that, but it's a question that they should ask. They are surrounded by many countries that have good relations with the world in general, not just with the Western world, where people are getting more prosperous, where industries are being developed. Look along the Gulf. Look at how Iraq is now working to boost its energy production, which will bring it great revenues in the future. So there are countries that work very well and peaceably with the rest of the world, whose citizens can look forward to a more prosperous future. Iran could be doing that. There isn't any reason on earth not to be doing that, and that would be a more sensible policy.
So if we go to the heart of your policy vis-à-vis Iran, it's not regime change by any chance?
We are not planning or engaged in regime change. We're not involved in the internal politics of other countries. Our quarrel is with the regime, with the government, not with the people of Iran. But it's not up to us to determine who is in government in the future.